Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next webinar for the Young Marine or for our adult volunteer series. I am trying to show myself here. Show myself here. Oh well, this isn't working, but I'll figure it out in a minute. So this is we did two this month. We did one early in October, which is really an end of September one that got postponed, and now we're at the end of October here. And in the midst of Red Ribbon Week. So I hope everybody's Red Ribbon Week is going well. So tonight, or just a quick reminder of our staff, your commander is Mr. Danny Chinchilla there. I took the screenshot a little bit earlier. I'm your executive officer. You have your regional support officers for the North units and the South units in our regiment, Krishna Kalamasandra and Mike Mallory. Derek Fuller is your adjutant, Yvette Goins is your financial manager, Angelica Mangabe is our training officer, and Melissa Villanueva is our DDR officer. And those are people that you can go to and ask questions or check in or whatever. I got a call from Fabiola Rodriguez out at Excelsior High Desert the other day with just a quick clarification on something in the adult volunteer manual. I was able to talk through it with her very simply, and it helped them help them move forward on an event that they have coming up. So that's what we're here for. Call, ask a question, have a conversation. It can get lonely leading, it can get lonely trying to come up with all the creative ideas. You now have an official source to bounce things off of, and it's nice when you can do that with somebody outside of your unit. So please utilize us because we're here for you. Tonight we have three subjects, the role of the regional support officers, and that's going to be presented by our two regional support officers in tandem. The role of the unit executive officer, something I wanted to talk about last month, but we didn't get to due to time. And then some updates, announcements, and reminders about mandated training by our regiment commander. Some housekeeping, as usual, please keep your cameras on if possible. We like to see you, and it's kind of tough talking to black blank boxes. Please keep your mics muted during presentations. You can ask questions via the chat, or you can wait to a Q&A session after each segment. Questions and comments, we have to keep those brief, under 20 seconds. If it gets longer than that, then we start basically starting a whole other segment. So if I cut you off, I apologize in advance. After the meeting, I intend to put out a survey and any handouts from our presenters that might be relevant so that you can help us, that survey so you can help us determine what to do for future webinars. And as always, thank you for being here, and please continue to encourage your fellow adult volunteers to attend. Sir, I wanted to give you an opportunity to say hello to our attendees tonight.
Well, thank you, appreciate that. As many of you know, Mr. Chinchilla will be leaving us pretty soon. Fortunately, he's been kind enough to give us an assisting hand until about I think he said the 20th of November, which is greatly appreciated. So he'll talk when he talks about the role of the executive officer. That is something that I'm really looking for because it's a big assist for all the things that have to be done. Beyond that, I am happy that you have returned. I look forward to continually keep growing this webinar. Again, as we were speaking earlier, it's about providing information not only to you but to the masses across the regiment, and the more education we have from or to all our adult volunteers, the better off we definitely are going to be, because we'll get a lot more input from them and we'll be more engaged. So welcome aboard. Thank you for being here. Chris, back to you, sir.
All right. So we're going to hand this over now to our regional support officer, who will talk to us about the role.
Okay. Can everyone see the share?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Thank you. So both Mike and I, along with our CO, we attended a RSO training during the first week of October this month. And we will going to share our learnings and the takeaways based on like what are the role of an RSO at the regiment level, and how we can help the units to do better. Over to you, Mike.
Okay, thank you very much. For those who don't know, I'm Mike Mallory. I'm the Executive Officer for Quartz Hill Young Marines and the Regiment Support Officer South for 1st California Regiment. And yes, RSO is a fairly new billet within the regiment. As Mr. Chalamasandra pointed out, we did attend our training session recently. Before that, the billet did exist for a little while, and it's kind of something that just got up and running over the past several months. And so at first we were just kind of calling around units, checking up and seeing how we could support them and so on and so forth. But attending the training was a really great experience because it was a much more clear picture of how the role is supposed to be fleshed out and what it's supposed to do. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we don't have battalions anymore, so there still needs to be that connection between units and the regiment, and regiment support officer is kind of an attempt to fill that. So going over the agenda, we've got our purpose and tasks, regiment expectations, unit activities planning, proactive unit checklist, and Q&A. So go ahead to the next slide. So as I said, regiment support officers serve as a liaison between Young Marines units and regimental leadership. And we have 4 main responsibilities. 1 is new unit development. 2 is supporting existing units. 3, auditing units for compliance. And 4, policy development, which is determining ways in which the regiment and HQ can better serve our units. So under the first task of new unit development, we went over various strategies of how we can expand the program. And one of the first ideas that was brought up was finding underserved population centers. So there are, even though we do have a lot of units, there's still a lot of empty space on the map across the country. So part of our task is to kind of pinpoint locations which might be a good location for a new unit, and also opening nearby units in areas where parents and volunteers drive more than an hour to drill. And I know a couple of adult volunteers personally who have stepped up to that challenge, but it does get to be daunting, especially in this age of high gas prices and whatnot. So in an effort to alleviate that, perhaps we can help out by opening a nearby unit that can take the strain off of having parents and volunteers and Young Marines drive so far. And third on the list was fostering relationships with organizations in the community, such as DAV, American Legion, VFW, Marine Corps League, etc. So part of that initiative is to locate these organizations in the area that you're looking at, and to make contact and put some feelers out there and see what kind of interest we can get into starting up some new units. Also reopening closed units and opening Young Marines units at schools. And Steve Blatt from Ash Fork Young Marines was the one who brought that up because he's had extensive experience in this area. So he's a good one to contact if anyone is interested in looking to open a unit at a local school. Next slide, please. So for unit planting, must include 3 adult volunteer applications. UC, XO, FM, and adjutant roles must be filled. Regular meetings should be held with prospective volunteers, as well as scheduling drill meetings, recruit training, orientation, open houses, etc. Review roles and responsibilities. And headquarters is also pitching in a $750 stipend that will be provided to startup units upon their first recruit graduation. So I think that's pretty awesome. Next, under our purposes and tasks, audit units and report to regiment. So a big focus of our training was going through the Young Marines database and looking at different ports to just get a handle on what the health of each individual unit is. And there's actually a lot to dig into there, but there was a lot of discussion over our time there about what constitutes a successful unit, and a lot of the same themes kept popping up. Like, is the unit current on their data entry? Are they current on their financials? How's their DDR? How's their training? So, from our point of view, especially being a good distance away from physically from a lot of the units that we represent, these things are really important. So, you might have a unit that says, well, we're kind of doing these things, but we just didn't get around to putting it in the database. But that in the long run is going to hurt you, and it's going to hurt your young Marines, because when we go to look at these things, you might have certain events going on, but if we pull up the data entry and we see that nothing's been entered for a year, it kind of raises some red flags. So we highly encourage everyone in the areas where it really matters with data entry, financials, et cetera, to keep your data entry up to date and be financially compliant. All right, next slide, please. So there's an intervention process that will be implemented with all of this as Christian and I contact our units. So as we comb through the units' databases and see where the issues are, if anything really stands out, then it's our job to contact the unit commanders and/or XOs to just discuss it and say, hey, I noticed that there's certain things that you're behind on, or certain things you need help with. How can we be of assistance? And it's just kind of a friendly hello, and just reaching out to see what ways we can help, and then we can reassess that. Now, if the issues get resolved, that's great. If not, if it becomes a recurring thing, then the next level of escalation would be a visit from the regiment training staff. And again, we can reassess that after the visits to the unit. And if that doesn't work, the next level up is division level training, where we kind of address everybody at once and reassess from there. If further intervention is needed, then headquarters steps in to intervene and train and reassess. And then the last and final step would be the National Executive Director and Deputy Director stepping in if the unit gets to that point where they're not getting themselves up to standard. All right, and then purpose and tasks, RSO recommendations. As I suggested, or as I talked about earlier, policy development suggesting ways for divisions and HQ to better serve their units. And then there's also tools, database calendar, and this is something I want to touch on briefly because according to headquarters, there are a lot of units out there that are using their own calendar or their own versions of a calendar. Some units have their own websites or their own Google calendars or whatnot. And they really highly emphasized, to use the database calendar to plug in all your events if you can, because these tools have already been provided and already been paid for, and it's just publicly available and already ready to go. So please utilize those if you can. And we also have Office 365 accounts, which utilize Outlook's, Teams, Office, and SharePoints, where we can communicate with each other. And right now I'm going to turn it over to Krishna for the rest of the presentation. So take it away, sir.
Thanks, Mike. And a couple of points to add on the database calendar. With your unit activities marked on this database calendar will provide a visibility to the regiment level. So that way RSOs or regiment staff can find out if there are any special events or some of the important events where they can also participate. So that way they can reach out to the unit UC or XO and have an engagement and come and visit be part of those ceremonies or events which are happening. It helps that way and provides more visibility into what cadence the units are meeting for the drills, and it will help regiment to assess and help out the units to do better. And also another point on this audit and the RSO intervention. As Mike was mentioning, database provides a lot of reports, and we had an extensive training and exercise on pulling out different reports, how to analyze them, and add filters to get more visibility into the accurate information where the gaps are. So both of us RSOs will be closely looking into these reports and work with our regiment staff to see where the gaps are and how we can engage with those units and what way we can help them to do better. And then, as we all know, at the regiment level, the main expectation is to have all the units like a good units, right? And what a good unit. Part of our training, we had a session where it was a working session where we were formed in small groups, or at the division level, we were kind of grouped and to define what a good unit is, right? And definitely, like, everyone will have their own relative definition for a good unit, but these are some of the points which stood out as a common point across all the different divisions who participated in the training. Like a good unit is one which can execute a plan, right? They should have a plan. That means that this unit can come up with a plan, they have a plan in place, and they can execute according to the plan, right? And also they're very good at the growth, getting new recruits, running recruit training, and getting those recruits kind of promoted to young Marines, and a lot of promotions happening, and also retention, right? Retention of young Marines. And as Mike mentioned multiple times, the good unit is the one which will keep their database compliant, right? From all aspects, like it can be DDR or finance related. And also, as we see the unit Young Marine of the Year, we are kind of trying to follow up with some of the units where they have not updated their Young Marine of the Year information yet, right? So these are some of the other additional parameters which we can focus on to make sure we can become a good, better, and best operating unit, right? And last but not least, make it fun for all, right? We need to think creatively, think out of box, and engage all the adult volunteers, the staff, and the parents, right? Parent support, and have a kind of effective collaboration and communication to come up with new ideas to engage and motivate our young Marines. And this is another exercise we had in another session where how we can plan things, right? So start with a year plan, and within 30 minutes, we should be able to do some planning, right? So for example, start putting all the notes, right? The regular events which needs to happen, right? The mandatory events, for example, the July 4th parade, or any other these kind of mandatory events which happens every year. We can start with those knowns and musts, and also based on the incoming recruits, we can some recruit training, the encampments, the division level encampments, and other encampments at the unit level. Then drill based on the cadence. Each unit runs the drill. They can mark the drills for the whole calendar year, and also other fun activities and other engagement activities which unit can plan. So that way, start with some high level planning with all knowns, musts, and slowly keep on adding as and when different activities, volunteering events as they come up. And the final slide. So to be a proactive unit, to be a good unit, we need to be proactive. And we were discussing about like how UCs, XOs can be proactive. And these are some of the pointers which we can focus on. UCs, XOs, and adjutants can focus on to be more proactive, looking into the pending tasks. So one good thing in database is as soon as we log into the database, when we land on the home page, these tabs are in red color, right? If there are some items which were not looked into or not read, it's highlighted with red. That gives an indication that we may have some pending tasks or interest forms or reminders or which are not been attended yet. And finally, even at the unit level, there are a lot of reports available, which provides great visibility into how are we doing, how our young Marines are doing, what they need, to get promoted, or what they need to get the additional like billet training. So you can pull out those kind of reports and take necessary actions to plan out and support the young Marines. So that's all we had for today. We are happy to answer any questions if you have. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so I think I see a question there from Mr. Soto, or Joseph,
Any
I see
questions?
Joseph, I see a hand up. Is that, do you have a question, sir? Or was that just your hello hand?
No, I apologize. I have no question.
Okay,
Hello.
just a couple things I want to touch on. The one thing that was mentioned was about the stipend, about $750. Just want to clarify, I think $500 of that comes from headquarters. And I think the other $250 is out of pocket from, well, I forget his name, Colonel, anybody.
Smith?
Yes, thank you. So that's kind of where that's coming together. The other thing that I saw, one of the bullet points that talked about auditing units for compliance. Typically, folks, when that word audit comes in, they're like, what the heck? We are not here to get into your business. That's not really the function of the RSOs. But let's be honest with a couple things. We do have units throughout the country that do not do data entry. We know of a lot of units that are having consistent drills, and when you look at the database, there's nothing logged. All right, we've had situations where DDR is not logged for a long time, and then after the quarter's done, somebody may come back later on down the road a few months later and try to backdate and fill that. So those type of things hurt your young Marines, especially when certain qualifications are coming up and the system goes in and digs in for dates. Now you got to remember, you guys can check this on yourselves. When you do your data entry, there's a little thing up there that says edit history, right? And you can click on that and you can see what changes were made, by whom they were made, and when they were made. So even though you backdated it, maybe to fit the quarter, right? The system may not recognize that. The system may just take a look at the entry date point. So you got to be careful with that. The idea of the RSO is to help provide some oversight and alert you to situations. So there's still a lot of autonomy that is given to the unit commanders in the operations of their units. But again, the whole idea for us is to help and assist and try to bring everybody up to par and online with the things that we have to do. Okay, that's what I have on that.
Okay,
Hello.
if any questions come up for RSO, you can still throw them in the chat, and we can revisit the topic if we have time at the end. I think my biggest thing is I know I've mentioned this at a few webinars. I know that our headquarters elements have always had that stigma of they only call when something's bad, and audits and regional support officers are going to intervene, and these big scary words. The interesting thing when these positions were first announced, the regiment staff got together and said, okay, let's take this crazy job description that headquarters threw out and make it bite-sized and manageable and realistic, with more friendly sounding words that are centered around support rather than criticism. So that's the biggest thing is, the RSOs, they have things that they're operating on, and those terms are helpful for them, but ultimately it comes down to this, the support in a regional support officer. That's all it is. Embrace the inspectors, be willing to have people come by. Don't worry about a perfect day. Don't be scared that your event is on a calendar and a recruit and somebody's going to show up at your recruit graduation. It's not about that. It's about what can we do to just talk and be better with each other. So I'm going to move on to our next part, which is from me. And I'm going to be talking about the role of the unit executive officer which I hope will be interesting and helpful. Let me get my presentation kicked here. Are we seeing full screen here?
Mhm.
Okay. Excuse me, sorry about that. All right, so the role of the unit executive officer. This is kind of an important topic to me because I've dealt with a lot of unit commanders, unit XOs, unit staff, and I've seen the value of a strong bond or connection between the unit executive officer and the commander and the staff. And where there's a weak point, sometimes it's not as much the unit commander as you might think. It's sometimes the unit executive officer. And I don't mean to say weak point as in the person is ineffective or unwilling or not committed, but more in the sense of sometimes that role is not as clearly defined, or it's thought of as more of an assistant. UC couldn't make it today, so I'm going to say some stuff, but otherwise I don't really, do anything. But unlike the vice president of the United States, who has like two things that he's supposed to do or she's supposed to do in the Constitution, the unit executive officer is more of a reversal role. As you see here, the queen on the chessboard is highlighted, and that's a very powerful piece. It can go anywhere. It can go more places than the king can. So that's what I want to talk about. I'll be referring to the Adult Volunteer Manual, the Training Officers Manual, and the Commander's Manual. As far as my experience, I started volunteering as a unit executive officer, or within about a year, I was the unit executive officer. So I've been in that role. I've trained 3 executive officers for my unit in my time, and I have served as a battalion executive officer and as your regiment executive officer. So that XO role, even though I've been a unit commander and a school director and these other in-charge roles, that XO role is very kind of near and dear to my heart, and I've worked with some good people who have filled that role, and they've helped me learn a lot about it. I'm hoping to share some of that wisdom today. So the unit commander and the executive officer, some of this is going to be reading. Forgive me for that, but I will talk about everything in turn. So the Young Marines unit from the Adult Volunteer Manual says that it's led by the unit commander and assisted by the executive officer and the unit and support staff. And page 1-6 says, in the absence of the unit commander, the XO assumes those duties, and I mean fully fledged. So that's important to note. So I'm going to talk about some things that the XO is kind of tasked with directly in the Adult Volunteer Manual or other manuals. I'm not going to hit everything, but I do want to key in on some of the bigger, the kind of the meat and potatoes ones, and we'll dig into some other stuff later. So the executive officer or the promotion board is a mandatory requirement for a young Marine to get promoted. It's not something to be skipped. It's not something that we don't really need to do it. They're green across the board. It is supposed to be done according to the Training Officers Manual. Specifically, it's supposed to be the task of the executive officer, and so it has a nickname, the XO board. Now that's a nickname, not an ownership kind of type name. The Adult Volunteer Manual says that the board should be convened, or that the XO should convene a unit promotion board as required for promotions. Members of the board at minimum should consist of the executive officer, a young Marine senior in rank to those standing the board, or another adult volunteer if the senior young Marine isn't available, and at least one other adult volunteer. Now that other adult volunteer could be the executive or the unit commander, him or herself. But the idea is that it's traditional and it's helpful if the unit commander can be removed from that process, not because they don't have a say. As a matter of fact, we see in our next one that the board will recommend a decision to the unit commander, but the unit commander has final authority on whether a young Marine is promoted, even if the board members all reject a young Marine for whatever reason. But the unit commander can serve on that board. And even though it says members of the promotion board at a minimum will consist of the executive officer, so it's like, well, the XO has to be on it. No, that's not true. If the executive officer is related to the young Marine, the executive officer cannot be on the board. You can't have anybody related to the young Marine. And so sometimes in our Adult Volunteer Manual and other manuals, we know as people who read it on a regular basis that we will find things that seem to contradict. And so what do? We err on the side of caution. I would rather the XO recuse themselves from the board and put a non-related adult volunteer in their place for that particular young Marine than go the other route. I'm gonna, the XO stays on the board because that's what the manual says. So we always want to err on the side of caution so that we're doing the right thing and we are, as the military term goes, above reproach. And that's part of what that's part of what this class or this presentation is about, is not just here's what's in the manual, but a little bit of let's dig into when we run into conflicts or the tougher information. To continue on the board, it's again, the training officer's manual said it's scheduled and overseen by the unit XO. We covered this, Mike Mallory covered this back in the May 25th webinar. So you can go to YouTube and find that and watch his whole presentation on how to conduct a promotion board. So that's not what this is about, so right now we're just talking about the authority behind it. Now, because it's scheduled and overseen by the unit executive officer, there might be some confusion there, and I want to make this very clear. The XO cannot refuse to hold a promotion board. The unit commander is in command of the unit. That's why that term is like that, and is responsible for everything the unit does or fails to do. So if the unit commander directs the executive officer to conduct a promotion board, the executive officer is to hold that board. There's no question. There's no, I don't have time, or no, it's too soon. No, you hold the board. You were directed to do that by the unit commander. If we look at the commander's manual, page 2-8, the XO shall perform duties as directed by the unit commander, not as inclined, not as convenient, not may perform those duties if they wish, shall and will. So I want to make that clear, because sometimes, again, there's these little power struggles, and it's important for us to find some clarity on them. Moving to another topic, just the election status of the executive officer. Although executive officers are elected, the UC can inactivate them. So according to the adult volunteer manual, the unit commander may inactivate an adult volunteer whenever they have lost confidence in their ability to function as a positive team member of the staff and does not have to re-register the adult volunteer at re-registration. There is no indication in this manual or any other that I found that this does not also apply to the XO. Who is one of the adult volunteers of the unit. So if the UC were to inactivate an XO, the unit would simply begin a special election for a new XO. Now that's, hopefully you're enjoying this, because sometimes we get at this adult volunteer training and it's like, oh God, I'm just reading from the screen. Hopefully we're digging in some nitty gritty and you're going like, whoa, hey, this is interesting. But I do want to clarify that last part. So when we talk about assisting, the unit commander with leadership, the unit commander shall perform the duties necessary to provide positive leadership and responsible management of the unit. So we have to think about that in terms of what I just said about inactivating an adult volunteer. This means that although the unit commander has that control over what adult volunteers can participate in the unit, that is a power that should be handled with the utmost delicacy, the utmost gravity, and it should be wielded as rarely as possible. I have found myself in the last 6.5 years inactivating 2 adult volunteers, and that was it. And the situations were not necessarily, excuse me, explosive or anything like that. But sometimes we have to do that. But we have to work our way toward that. So it should not be just I don't like my XO or I don't like this AV, and so inactivation. There should be a lot more leadership that comes before that. As far as the executive officer too, when that's being handled, the XO should be there and willing to help or guide or redirect the unit commander when needed. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, and the executive officer, one of their best functions is to be that sounding board, to be that different opinion or that devil's advocate to their unit commander and say, let's think about this in a different way, because we know that passions can kind of overwhelm our better judgment sometimes. So again, we're talking about who's in charge and who does this and who can remove who from positions, but that's the extreme stuff. The reality is we know it should be a symbiotic partnership. It should be a relationship and a friendship. So I want to talk about the term itself, right? Executive officer. We're talking about we're talking about that root word, going back to our 3rd, 4th grade grammar classes. The executive officer is supposed to execute. That's the role. It's supposed to, that person is supposed to execute the vision of the unit commander. That means to take action. So in the Adult Volunteer Manual, the executive officer is second in command and assist the unit commander at all command levels in the performance of their duties. So these are very active words: performance, execute, second in command, right? And so it's the idea of going, sir, ma'am, what do you need? Got it. I'm going to make this happen. That's the power. That's the peace. That's the queen on the chessboard. That's the executive officer. So I want to give a regiment level example that Mr. Chinchilla, I'm sure, will remember. I think it was 2021. The regiments, the regiments merged. We went from Northern California, 1st California, and we came together. And so he was the commander of 1st California. I was the XO of Northern California. We took those two pieces and put them together. And we were tasked by division. All the regiments were tasked with, hey, we'd like to see your command staff set up, your regiment staff. We need some new battalion commanders because things had gotten moved around, or we needed to adjust a little bit. And I had worked with Northern California Regiment. I said, okay. So, well, sir, it's December. You know, holidays are coming up. I'm thinking, you know, maybe it was probably December 15th or 18th. We were approaching the holidays. So, you know, I can get this done for you by January 20th. I can get everybody in place. And he chuckled on the phone and he goes, I was thinking a week. And I went, okay. And I was like, he wants this done in 7 days. It's Christmas time. People are, you know, units are kind of shutting down and closing down for the holidays. All right. I literally got off the call. It might have been a Zoom call. I got off. I started making calls to people. Some of you on this call might have been, you know, you might have remembered me getting in touch with you. And within 3 or 4 days, it was done. He said, do it. There's not me like, well, no. And, you know, I don't have that time, sir. No, I accepted that role as executive officer. If I'm not willing to execute, if I'm not willing to take immediate action, why am I there? And we got it done. But I love that there was that little nudge, and I went, yes, sir. That's what it means. And for those XOs on this call, or those, you know, those unit commanders on this call, start thinking in terms of this with your executive officer, or you, if you're in that executive officer role. So carrying on with this, the executive officer from the commander's manual should coordinate and supervise the adult staff to ensure the proper planning, organization, administration, and support of the unit to meet the mission, purpose, and objectives of the young Marines. We have to read our manuals and extrapolate from them, not like just scan over them. We have to realize that these are truly telling us what to do, and we have to pull out every implication that they make. So what does the executive officer do based on this paragraph? Well, at the very least, they should be scheduling, conducting, and following up on staff meetings. This is a task I recently delegated to my unit executive officer, and he's done a great job with it. You might notice that when meetings are scheduled or webinars are scheduled, the email comes from me on behalf of the regiment commander. I am executing the task. I am getting the staff, the adult volunteers together. That's the XO's job. The XO should be ensuring that the staff, the adjutants, the financial manager, the training officer are doing their jobs. We talked about data entry and getting that done. The XO should be the one tapping the adjutant on the shoulder on a weekly basis. What is the status of our entries for the previous, you know, week? I haven't gotten to the drill yet. Okay, that needs to get done, because then what happens? Adjutants get overwhelmed. They've got 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 entries, and they can't remember who is at that, and they're trying to find their sign-in sheets, and suddenly things are getting done. And you go, well, you know, the adjutant, they're just not a very responsible person or whatever. You know, we run into that. But I would actually turn and look at the executive officer and say, when was the last time you spoke to the adjutant? When was the last time you spoke to the training officer to get a training plan to you? When was the last time you checked in with the financial manager? That is your job. You are there to manage the staff. And that means checking in and holding them accountable. If the unit's not performing well, I mentioned this earlier, people tend to blame the unit commander. And I'm not saying that, you know, the UC can just, it's all the XO's fault, because, hey, you're the unit commander, the buck stops there. But in reality, that's when the unit commander needs to pull the XO aside and say, look, I need more from you. And if you're not willing to do that, let me know so I can move on to somebody else. The XO is also a good person to handle disputes among staff, young Marines, and parents. Reserve the unit commander and the weight and authority that comes with that for the really tough cases. Let your executive officer go out and be effective. XOs, go out, be willing to have those critical conversations with parents and with fellow staff. Help the staff if there's conflict, resolve those conflicts together. And then, of course, it's very important. We have to keep the unit commander informed. It's one thing to go and manage the staff and run the show, but you don't want to look at the UC and say, "I got this. Don't worry about it." You don't need to know. But don't get me wrong. I've had my unit commander or my executive officer say, "Don't worry about it, sir." And it's been helpful. And there are times he knows when I just don't need to be involved. It's handled, and I'm going to blow a gasket if I find out. So that's good to know, but that takes a while before we get there. And if I ever push and say, "No, I want to know what happened," he always says, "All right, here's what went down." And that makes it sound like there's all sorts of bad stuff happening in my unit. That's not the case, but every now and then he'll be that peacekeeper. But we want to keep the UC informed, because if they are responsible for everything the unit does or fails to do, they should know what you're doing the way that you know what the staff is doing. And it shouldn't be having to wait for the XO to come to you, or for the UC to come to you and ask, "What are you doing, XO?" The XO should take that initiative to say, "Here's what I have been doing, and here's what I intend to do." So as a quick review, down and dirty review, the executive officer, you're responsible to your unit commander for the good order and discipline of the unit, to include managing the staff, as I mentioned in point 3. Carry out directions, execute the vision of the unit commander, make sure your staff is on point and staying up to speed. Because you know what, you're that queen on the chessboard. You are the power piece. Play well. What questions or comments does anybody have on this topic? Okay, if there's little quiet questions that are in the back of your head and you don't want to ask them in person because, man, this is a little controversial, write them down, put them in the survey. Give me a call, shoot me a text, call the commander and tell them that you completely disagree with everything I said. That's fine. But the big thing is have that conversation, because that's the good thing, is when we're willing to go, like, let's talk about the important stuff. What I'm going to do is hand it over now back to our regiment commander, and he's going to take us into some updates, announcements, and some reminders about mandatory adult volunteer training.
Okay. Well, first of all, Chris, thank you. That's all really good information. I agree 100% that having an awesome XO is one of the things that makes life easier for you, the commander, or any command level, because it does take a team to make this stuff happen. And it's always good, because there's times where he's looked at me and he said, "I think you should handle this one, sir." And okay, our HIP, rank has its privilege and rank has its problems. So that's part of the teamwork that goes along. I want to touch on a couple things, not necessarily all good news, but at the last division commanders meeting, one of the things that we were discussing were awards that were issued at the D6 Morning Star encampment. That being specifically Map and Compass, Land Navigation, and the Orienteering ribbons. The situation that we're having is that those awards really take an extensive amount of work by a young Marine to earn. And though they were issued at the encampment, young Marines only had about 2.5 hours of actual work to get those 3 ribbons. And when we started looking at the qualifications, a lot of our young Marines don't really, I don't want to say don't deserve, but did not earn them for the intent of what the award is. So the discussion was the discussion was had, excuse me, that the division adjutant is going to go in and back out those ribbons. I do not know as of today whether she has done that. I do know as of last Friday I actually went into my own unit and pulled those ribbons or those awards from my young Marines for that specific reason. I am telling you because it's something I need you to consider, discuss with your unit commander or discuss with whomever, your adjutant, about that. And I don't know if division is actually going to make that happen, but you have to make that decision whether your young Marines that attended Morning Star deserve those awards. I'm not going to tell you to take them away. We've always had this little things that, hey, they were issued, so it's theirs. But you got to be honest, you got to be fair with your young Marines. And young Marines that have awards that they haven't earned, sooner or later they're going to get called on it. They're not going to know the subject matter, and they're going to be placed in what I would consider maybe an embarrassing situation. So give that some thought. A lot of the units have submitted their regiment dues, their division and regiment dues. So I thank quite a few of them. Some are still lacking. If you have not sent in your dues, please do so. Those regiment dues will support either whether they be symposiums, the upcoming young Marine boards, or anything else that may crop up, and even in some cases, special assistance to a young Marine or to a special cause related to young Marines. And it's the additional $5 per young Marine and adult volunteer. I think the last email I sent out, I was just saying, just send the whole thing to me. I'll divvy it up. I've already sent division a couple checks for their portion. And then I would like just to see the entire regiment participate in that. So if you have not, please take a look and do so. And then lastly, right now where we are is with the Regiment Young Marine of the Years. As you know, instead of the battalion, we now have a junior level and we have a senior level, which encompasses what would have been the Regimental Young Marine of the Year. The guidelines are the same as they are for battalion and regiment. So the junior young Marines, I would tell you to follow the requirements in the adult volunteer manual for the battalion level, and the senior young Marines follow the requirements for the regimental level. A couple differences right off the bat. One is that there's an October 31st end date for the battalion Young Marine of the Year, which would be the junior today. Those we have extended to November 15th, which is the last reporting day or the day that we publish the names. So in the regiment, like I said, that's also November 15th. So those two awards will have the same publishing date of November 15th. The board, I was trying to get an extension to have a board somewhere around maybe the 19th at the latest, the 19th of November, mainly because we do have the Veterans Weekend coming up on the 12th. If not, we would have to hold this board on the 5th. I have not had a response to that because the publishing requirement for the manual is the 15th, and I believe that the database has to be published by that date. So I don't know if that's locked in. Right now, as of this moment, pass along that the board will be held on November 5. It'll be held here in Palmdale. I think last year we did it up in Kern, but this year we're going to do it here in Palmdale. So again, the requirements are that as posted for battalion and regiment in the manual. So look at those. I will issue a supplement out. I will try to have that out by tomorrow, if not the following day, to all unit commanders or all units about that. And then we'll go from there. So it'll be held at the Antelope Valley National Guard Armory here, where the Antelope Valley Marines conduct their drills. And I believe that's, Chris reminded me earlier, the Adult Volunteer of the Year and the Unit of the Year also have the publication date of 15 November. So if you go into the manual, for the most part, it's time to do your write-ups. Consider your adults and consider your unit, and go ahead and get those things submitted. Send them in to me. so that we can look at the selection. As back to the manuals with that, the requirements are basically in the manual. There's always a difficulty with all the information that's put in there. Just do the best write-up for what you've done in the past year, what you believe you've accomplished, how you've benefited the community in your area. Because there's always that discussion that, you have certain units that have more access to community services, to community entanglements with groups and things like that, and other units are lacking that. So what I'm looking for is participation. Just that good old trying to get out there and do things. And we'll go from there. But do your write-ups for both of those, adult volunteers and unit of the year. I think that's all I have. Chris, anything else that you can think of?
Yeah, so I just got a message from one of our participants saying like, oh, it's not a great day, we're not available. It is what it is. If you're not there, you can't compete, and sometimes we have to adjust to what's going on. And so the regiment only does one or two things a year, and I would encourage you to think proactively. And if you're starting to plan things in November, but you've got Young Marines eligible for a certain board, start contacting us and saying, when's that board going to be? Because we got some stuff going on. Or find a way to hold that event and pull your senior Young Marines from it so that they can go compete. So that's for your consideration, but that's the policy. Sir, there was also.
I'm sorry, I was just gonna say real quick, sometimes when I hear we're not available, I don't know if we're always speaking about the adult volunteers. That they're not available to bring the Young Marines. I see no reason why the parent can't do it as long as the parent is willing. So very, very few reasons that someone cannot attend the board. It is a little bit of a sacrifice, and I do feel, especially if they're coming out of Sacramento or San Francisco. I know that's a heck of a drive, but it's as you said, it is what it is, and to stand the board, you got to be there for it.
Backing up to another question, what were the ribbons?
The ribbons were map and compass, land navigation, orienteering.
Yeah, I wasn't even at the encampment, and I can tell you that those Young Marines did not earn that, not even close. So do the right thing, have integrity. Don't wait for the division adjutant. If your Young Marines win, go in the database and delete those ribbons. That's my piece on that. And then another one, sir, with the dues, to who should those be made payable to?
So what I had mentioned is just $5 for each individual sent to First California Regiment. I will break it out. I will send the $1, for again each individual out to division. Or if you want to separate it, you want to send 2 checks and 2 letters, that's fine. I just found it's easier. I will send you back a receipt with that, with what I've received, so that you have that also. And I'll take care of that game from there.
Again, sometimes we see things differently. I, as a unit commander, would send a division check and a regiment check. I think that helps finances look a little bit more clean, but that's up to you. So I know I did that. I sent a check to First California Regiment Young Marines, payable to Mr. Chinchilla, and I sent a Division 6 Young Marines, payable to the division commander. Another question. I don't know what the question was. Fabiola, you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you, sir. So in regards to the Morning Star, I agree 100%. I do not believe any of those kids earned the ribbons, so I will be talking to my commander about pulling those ribbons as well. I did have a question on the swim qualification, though. I seen the list of those that passed from my unit prior to leaving the encampment, and there's one young Marine that did not receive it updated on the database.
Okay, so let's hold that for after we end the recording.
Okay.
And we'll come back to that in a second. And sir, you asked if there was anything else. I know that you wanted to talk about mandatory training. I can do that really quick. What I wanted to share is, again, we've seen that the
Oh, thank you.
mandatory reporter training is supposed to be out there, so you can find that through your account, going to Young Marines University, and when you're in your account here, you go to courses catalog down here, and this is what you need to focus on at these required courses. So you've been taking the test, you should do that, but mandatory reporter training is what I think is supposed to be due by December 31st. I've taken it. It was painless and took me about half an hour. I had to stop in the middle of it and come back, and it was still a total of about half an hour. And it's a good reminder. Also, if you're a dog volunteer, sometimes people will say, well, you know, I'm a social worker or I'm a teacher, I've already done that. The young Marines still want you to do it because they need to show in their organization and our organization that you have taken our training. So please tell those people that are experts in the subject already, they still need to go take this painless 15, 20-minute course and knock it out. I don't have anything else, sir, unless you have something. He went to a black screen, we probably lost him. Any additional questions or comments from anyone?
I am.
Sir, do you have any closing comments? Okay. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, I guess I was gonna kind of answer the question from Fabiola, but just essentially, I would try contacting with visiting Lewis. But some of the young Marines, they were really strict, doing the best they could with that pool. And there are quite a few young Marines that did not pass. So maybe that might be the reason that there was no update for that one individual. Other than that, again, guys, thank you. Please extend the invitation to all your adult volunteers to come on in and join us. I think there was some great lessons today, and I'd love to have that shared with them if at all possible.
We have 8 units represented here, and that's a good chunk of our regiment. That's awesome. Hopefully those of you that are here are kind of distributing or disseminating or telling people to go look at the webinars. I know sometimes it's a work schedule, but unit commanders and XOs that are on the call, this is not just for you. So stop being the one who's used to getting all the information and be willing to bring your people into it. And don't worry about, I don't want them to be exposed to these very controversial opinions. Let them be exposed. Let's talk. Let's learn. That's how we grow as people and as volunteers. So thank you all for being here, and I hope to see more of your people next time. I probably won't be here for that one, but I hope more people will be here for the future webinars. So go forth, make an impact. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.